Some breaking news to tell you about. We are able to report that FBI Director Kash Patel is in, quote, panic mode. We have that brand new reporting breaking moments ago from our colleagues Carol Leonnig and Ken Delanian. It's about the turmoil inside the FBI right now after a string of deeply embarrassing and rather alarming stories about Kash Patel and his tenure as the head of the country's top law enforcement agency. From that new reporting, quote, Kash Patel has ordered the polygraphing of more than 24 former and current members of his security detail and other staff and has been described as in panic mode to save his job and find leakers among his team. That is according to two people briefed on the development. Kash Patel has walled himself off from some senior bureau leaders this week in the wake of multiple media reports that raised red flags about his leadership. What's more, Patel has reportedly avoided meeting with operational leaders at the FBI this week, raising fears that Patel is out of the loop on important investigations and threats. A spokesperson for the FBI declined to comment about the polygraph tests, but he denied that Kash Patel was walled off from senior staff at the FBI. I want to bring in senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig, who's bylined on that. Mark and Melissa are still here. Carol Leonnig, it doesn't sound like someone who's been defamed, does it?
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV. But as a reporter, Nicole, this is a person hunting for leakers pretty actively. And I think you've raised this point before, which is a smart one. How do you claim you're defamed, but also hunt for people who released information that you believe maybe is sensitive or is somehow protected? As we reported at MS Now I can't remember if it was 2 days ago or a day, but it was basically a finding that Patel had ordered this investigation into the leaks or the sources to an Atlantic magazine piece that described how FBI agents were super, super worried about the leadership of the Bureau because of Patel allegedly engaging in drinking to excess on a pretty regular basis and having to reschedule meetings in the mornings after these quote unquote alcohol-fueled events. We also then learned, because once you report one story, more people want to tell you more about other things that disturb them. We learned that Patel has ordered the polygraph of all of these agents, a very large group who used to travel with him and who travel with him now, to try to find out who may be talking to reporters. This is sending a real chill through the FBI, but even more worrisome to them, Nicole, is the way in which Patel has not agreed to meet with lots and lots of other operational leaders in the Bureau. This worries people because there's a regular sort of line of threats and investigations that the Bureau director needs to be briefed on and needs some input on. Of course, there are some decision points that he must be involved in, and this is worrying them. I agree that we should emphasize that the FBI spokesperson, Ben Williamson, said that Kash is having meetings with senior leaders, but he wasn't extremely specific about those he's not meeting with.
I'm going to do something I don't always do. I would like to read the piece. It is new since I've been on the air, but I think it's important for our viewers to hear what you're reporting right now exclusively. FBI Director Kash Patel has ordered the polygraphing of more than 24 former and current members of his security detail, and other staff has been described as in panic mode to save his job and find leakers among his team. That's according to two people briefed on that development. Patel has walled himself off, as we've been discussing, from some senior Bureau leaders this week in the wake of multiple media reports that raised red flags about his leadership. That's according to three people familiar with his recent actions. Two of the people told MS Now that the director ordered the polygraphing this week of the former and current security detail members, as well as several information technology staff. I want to stop here and just, we don't focus in on this, but this is a hallmark of the Atlantic reporting as well. This is deeply sourced. Every line has a minimum of two, in some instances, three sources. Just talk about that level of corroboration.
It's nice of you to ask, because I think this highlights something you may not intend to highlight, but think about what it must be like to work in the FBI or in law enforcement And as we have described in our reporting, to feel that the Bureau is in danger because of who is directing it. And think about what it must be like to see colleagues and hear colleagues are being polygraphed, or maybe even former colleagues or friends, people who've been fired, and then still be willing to talk to me and to Ken. So I'm grateful to the sources who continue to share information with us, and actually to other reporters as well. I mean, come to us first, but yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty impressive. I think it's just really pretty impressive that people feel this information needs to get out and take some risks to do so. The corroboration is important. I thought the Atlantic's corroboration was really impressive as well. A very deeply reported piece of work. I wasn't involved in it, obviously, but they spent a lot of time and energy and confirmed to their solid view of the threshold. They confirmed something that a lot of reporters, including me, had been hearing about for a while and trying to confirm this idea that he had to be rousted in the morning by agents who were concerned that he might be quite ill or worse as a result of alcohol that he had drunk the night before.
I want to read a little bit more from the reporting. The FBI director demanded the polygraph examinations to determine if any members of the team that accompanies him on all his travels or staff who have access to sensitive details about his decisions have communicated with reporters, according to the People, who asked to speak anonymously due to threat of retribution. Now, there is nothing sensitive in his travels. He actually posts a lot on social media. He had cameras in the locker room when he traveled to the Milan Olympics and guzzled beer in front of them. What is it? Is it fear that gets them to even carry out an investigation into at least two reporters, allegedly, Ms. Fitzpatrick and the New York Times reporter who wrote about his girlfriend?
Yeah. So as we reported in the case of the investigation opened into the Atlantic reporter, sorry, I lost my voice there for a second. Agents and sources told my colleague Ken Delaney in pretty sympathetic tone that, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't open this probe. And I'm paraphrasing a little here. If we don't open this probe, the agents are fearful they're going to be fired. In the case of the New York Times reporter, Elizabeth Williamson, a former colleague of mine and a great reporter, it appears from the New York Times' very good reporting that was a case where agents were asked to investigate and were able to sort of tamp that down by saying the investigation was not warranted. Apparently, we've moved past that place in a very few number of weeks. And if you'll grant me the liberty, Nicole, I want to emphasize one other thing about polygraphing. In the course of reporting this story today, I learned something new that I'd never heard before, which was that Kash Patel, the director, engaged in another mass polygraphing event when there was a report that he had requested a gun. And apparently an agent had mentioned this on a call with other agents, and that made him sort of subject number one or suspect number one. I actually don't know the name of that agent, but it led to the polygraphing of dozens of agents to try to figure out who had revealed information from this call.
Let me just ask you to explain the normal use of the polygraph. I mean, a polygraph is a tool that the FBI sometimes uses at an entry point, but it is not. It is not like a, like re-upping your IT creds. Like, it is not a tool that any agent is subjected to in a leak investigation by their own organization. Just speak about how outside the norm, how sort of North Korea adjacent this practice is at the FBI as an ongoing management tool from its leader.
If there were, I want to be sort of sober about this, if there were a leak of classified information at the Justice Department or at the FBI, and I know of cases like this about which I was reporting at the time, there would be great concern about bringing in the circle of people who had access to this information and asking them in an interview, did you communicate with a reporter about this? It would not, on first blush, be a polygraph, but there is a presumption inside the government, in the Justice Department and the FBI, that no one is going to lie when asked that question. No one. I don't know what the circumstances are today, but I know about cases I wrote about at the time, and there is a view that if you're brought into that room and you've talked to a reporter, you are going to own up to it. A polygraph is exceptionally rare, but really, really rare in the leak of information, as you described, that is not classified, that is about what is the director doing? What is the director ordering in the case of an investigation of looking at the contacts and sources of a reporter engaged in normal news gathering? It is not in any way something that's been used.
The latest reporting around Kash Patel doesn't just describe internal turmoil, it reveals something more unsettling, a leadership style that appears driven by fear rather than control. And in an institution like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that distinction matters more than anywhere else. Ordering widespread polygraph tests to hunt for leaks might sound decisive on the surface, but in practice, it signals a breakdown of trust. Organizations built on intelligence and discretion rely on internal confidence, not internal suspicion. When dozens of agents and staff are suddenly treated as potential threats, the message is clear: loyalty is in doubt, and paranoia is taking its place. What makes this situation more alarming is not just the act itself, but the context surrounding it. Reports of Patel isolating himself from senior leadership and avoiding routine briefings suggest a leader retreating inward at precisely the moment when outward engagement is most critical. The FBI director's role isn't symbolic, it's operational. Stepping away from that responsibility, even temporarily, creates real risks. There's also a deeper contradiction at play. On one hand, there are claims of being unfairly targeted or misrepresented in the media. On the other, there's an aggressive internal effort to identify and punish those speaking to journalists. Those two positions don't sit comfortably together. If the information is false, the response would typically be transparency and rebuttal, not an expansive search for internal dissent. The use of polygraphs in this context is particularly telling. Within federal law enforcement, they are rare tools, generally reserved for serious breaches involving classified information. Deploying them broadly in response to unflattering reporting crosses into territory that feels less like standard procedure and more like institutional overreach. It risks normalizing a culture where speaking up, even responsibly, becomes dangerous. And that's where the real damage lies. When agents begin to feel that raising concerns could lead to retaliation, the flow of critical information slows. In an agency tasked with protecting national security, that chilling effect isn't just a workplace issue, it's a public safety concern. Ultimately, this isn't just about one director or one controversy. It's about whether a critical institution can maintain its integrity under pressure. Leadership at this level requires steadiness, openness, and accountability. When those qualities are replaced by defensiveness and isolation, the consequences ripple far beyond internal politics. Because in the end, an agency like the FBI doesn't just enforce the law, it depends on trust to function.